Yes, that should work. All right, cool. So this session, we are going to be looking at putting images onto the DOM. And this is done through ATM-4, but technically Starry Night. So they're displayed through Starry Night, but the easiest way to get them up there and manipulate them by far is to actually use ATM-4. So most of the time here, I'm going to have ATM-4 showing up on my screen, as well as the Starry Night render box, so you can see the effect that it has going up there. So before we get started, I actually just want to do a quick kind of question here. How many of you were just in Michael's kind of Photoshop affinity, making the photos ready for a Starry Night session? Just kind of raise your hands. All right. Not as many as I expected. Interesting. Okay, cool. So if you were just in that session, this is the logical next step. Typically during training, we'll talk about how to get the images so that they can look nice on the dome, and then we go through the process of actually putting them on the dome, which is what we're going to be doing at this point. So if you are following along, then you will be wanting to have ATM-4 ready to go, and then RenderBox somewhere that you can see it, just to make sure that what you think is happening is actually happening.
Hey, Brad, okay. Sorry to interrupt. Is there a set of images we should have to be working with?
So there's the set of images that Michael has that you can, if you worked on those, they'll look good going up on the dome. If you don't have those, or you weren't in Michael's session, when we go through there's a whole host of images, kind of, one might say stock images, that will work for this purpose. They're not going to be exactly what you want. Dimensions and stuff like that might not be good. But for the purposes of getting images up on the dome, Preview Suite installs plenty of kind of options for you. You can even delve into the full dome curriculum if you want to use some of Dave Bradstreet's images. But he doesn't always use the rules, so that's also maybe not the best. But all right, so the first thing you'll want to do is just make a new show in ATM-4. So if you haven't already, go ahead and do File, New, and go ahead and create a show in ATM-4. And we're going to be working just with Starry Night. So we're going to ignore all the other stuff here. It's going to be exclusively Starry Night, because that's how we're going to be displaying these images up onto the dome. The queue that we want, so if you remember on Starry Night, we just double click somewhere where we want a queue. And the slide queue is what we're going to be working with here. Slide goes back to slide trays, and we're stuck with that now. So if you're new, sorry, but you just have to get used to calling it slides. And so if I open the slide queue, I get a queue dialog box to open up with a whole host of options, which we'll cover. But for now, we just want to work on getting an image on the dome and just see what it looks like with all the default settings. So later on, we'll play with some of the position and size and whatnot. But first, we just want to take a look at how do we load an image onto our dome. So up the top here, we'll see a button that says slide. So if you click on that, that should open up a window where we have options to pick from. And yours is probably going to open up and look something like this. How we have this set of kind of archaeology, astronomy, geology images that got put in with Preview Suite, I don't know. I have a sneaking suspicion Eric might have had something to do with it, but they're there. I noticed them. And so you have this whole set of images to work with if you want to. If you worked on, excuse me, some of Michael's stuff, some of these images, like the Apollo and satellite, might look familiar to you. I'm going to go ahead and just start with the Apollo rocket, but you feel free on your system to just use any of these images that you see here. For the purposes of learning how it works, any of these should work just fine. But since I have a rocket, I'm going to do the rocket. And so I select that, and it shows up right in here. And for now, I'm just going to keep all of the default settings. I'm just going to say, OK. And what that will do is load, put a slide queue on my track here. And now let's see what that looks like. So how do I bring up the playback controls? People remember? Pop quiz?
F4.
F4, fantastic. So I'm going to rewind here and play. And what we should see when the slide cue hits is there is my rocket. So do people get whatever image you picked? Did it show up on render box, hopefully? Good. Okay. So looks like the default settings are right in the front and kind of right at the base, because it looks like, this image I know is the entire rocket, and it looks like the middle of it is right at the base of the dome there. So the default settings put it in right in the front and right on the horizon. And so if I want to move it from there, I'll have to change the position. So let's say I'm happy with it showing up there, but I really want the audience to see the whole thing. Okay, so I can go into the queue and say, you know what, I'm okay with that, but I want the audience to know what the rocket looks like. I'm going to want to change the position of the rocket here. So I'm going to find the settings that deal with position, and I have the altitude and the azimuth that I can deal with here. So it's similar to altitude and azimuth in astronomy, but it's altitude and azimuth designed by computer programmers. So it's not matching Starry Night's altitude and azimuth exactly. All right. So the altitude is going to raise it and lower it. The azimuth is not necessarily going to rotate it in the direction that you think it will based on Starry Night. And we'll see that here in a little bit. But for now, just to raise it up, let's say I want to put it up, I don't know, 30 degrees. I'll say okay. And I'm going to rewind. And note when I rewind, what happened to my image? Disappeared, right? So when you rewind your show here, all the images that you have up there should disappear like it did there. So I'm going to hit play. And hey, look, there's my rocket. All right, everyone get their image up higher on the dome? All right, fantastic. So I'm actually going to go in, and I'm going to be a little bit picky, and I want the rocket looking like it's roughly on the ground there. So I'm going to make this maybe 25. And what's a quick way that I can test this out? Remember, if you want to test out what a queue can do?
Execute.
Execute. So if I hit execute, hey, that's looking a little bit better. Maybe more like 23. All right, that's good. I'm happy with that. So great, I have an image of a rocket appearing on the dome. But how does it appear? It kind of just shows up right there, right in our face, right? It would be a little bit nicer if instead of just suddenly there's a rocket, that there's a nice transition that the rocket comes in at, right? There's, just kind of slowly fades into existence. So I'm going to go back into my queue here. And instead of position, what I want to look at now is, how about this opacity? Like maybe I can make it not show up for a little while. And in fact, if you look on the right here, there's this transition time. Now, right now is set to 0, right? Which means it goes from not on to boom, I see everything. So if I set this transition time to, I don't know, say 3 seconds, note what the queue did. The queue got larger. So it's a visual indication that, hey, this is going to take 3 seconds. So that's a nice little thing ATM-4 does. So what we should see now is instead of the rocket suddenly being there is, hey, it fades up. Much nicer transition there, in my opinion. Okay, everyone get their image to kind of fade in over a certain period of time. Yep, much less harsh. All right, so I have my rocket here. What typically happens with rockets? We like to see them go up, right? So let's see if we can, now that I have my rocket here on the ground, let's see if I can launch it upwards onto my dome. And this is going to be a little tricky because I'm not really working with the dome, right? I have a dome preview, but it looks flat here on the surface here. So we're gonna run into a couple of tricks with Preview Suite, more than likely, and we'll work through those as we get there. So the first thing that I want to do, once I have my slide, my image on the dome, to change it in any way, I put another slide cue. So we're going to put another slide cue on there. And once you do, you'll notice the window is very different than the first time we put it up there. What ATM-4 has done is looked back and copied all the information from the original slide cue and pasted it into this new slide cue. And so everything here, you'll notice these all say unchanged. So all we have to do is open what we want to change and leave everything else alone. And everything else will stay the same. You won't see any effect from those. So in this case, I just want to try changing the position. And from 23, let's say I want to go up to, I don't know, 65. And I'll say, okay. And let's see what this looks like here. So rewind and play. So the rocket fades up. All right, we have a teleporting rocket. What did I do wrong? What did I forget?
The transition time.
Transition time. Yeah, if I go back in here, you'll notice that, hey, look, position, just like the opacity had a transition time, so it wasn't just suddenly on. The position has a transition time too. So instead of going from 23 to 65 degrees in 0 seconds, I can have it take something like 4 seconds. And now it should look a little bit more realistic. Like that. Much better. Okay. So anytime you're moving an image around on the dome, just make sure you have some kind of transition time there. Otherwise, it's just going to pop from one place to the other. Okay. Let's say the same time it's going up, I want it to kind of move to the side, either left or right. How do you think I could do that? So while it's moving upwards, I want it to move either left on the dome or right on the dome. What would the first step be? Can I do that? Azimuth. Yes, there we go. So I would go into my slide cue. Same one, right? Because I want it to happen at the same time. So I want it to go up, but also to the side. And then I'm going to say azimuth of, I don't know, say 25. Now, is that going to move it clockwise or counterclockwise? It's a good question. Let's find out. So it looks like it, now what does it look like it did? It looks like it kind of pivoted at the tip of the rocket off to the left there, right? This is where it not being up on a dome is going to start looking kind of funny. Because technically what's going on, I'll bring RenderBox here, is the azimuth is going from 0 at the base of the dome to 90 at the top. Okay, and the image technically can't go all the way from the bottom through the top of the dome to the bottom and the back. It's a feature you have to work around with Starry Night and ATM-4. So what we're seeing here is the rocket came up. The rocket is technically going through an angle.
Looks like Brad locked up. Yes.
It was pretty dazzling. I think he was just bedazzled.
Last time he had to I think, actually restart his computer.
He did.
Dan, have you got your preview suite going?
I can. I was not, because I was trying to save, computer resources here.
Okay, let me, I'm going to try to, I may not pick up exactly where Brad picked up. I'm actually kind of in the background working on a couple of other things, but I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And give me just a moment because I will need to open ATM-4.
Tell you, I think Brad does it on purpose. Pulls his power cord out of his computer or something.
Apparently, for some reason in his case, Zoom has just been completely locking up on him. So I'm going to kind of build this as I go, just to make sure that we're reviewing. And probably by the time I'm done with review, Brad will be back with us. So Brad began the process by deciding which slide we were going to work with, which is what we call a slide load. Okay. So, oops, where is the slide queue? And I think there's a folder that he had that I didn't have. So I'm just going to use, let's use this image here. And what I will typically do is execute immediately to see that slide located on the dome. I am really badly set up to do this because I'm still in this goofy mode where you can't see the bottom of my screen. So sorry, guys.
Hey, I have a question while you guys are getting stuff set up. In the last presentation, Michael said that when we add our slide that we wanted to click live, or is there a reason that like Brad didn't click live yet?
I think honestly, just because he was training.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
That's
if
fine.
you guys like, I think he was probably about to get to that anyway. So if you guys like, I'm going to cover that actually. What Brett's
perfect.
been showing you how to do is like, I think he increased the altitude to say 13 and then hit execute. And with size, I could take this up to 40 and hit execute. But there's a great trick that you can do. The very top button on the top left, live. What'll happen is all these values that we've been typing in, if you hover your cursor over that value, you'll notice it changes into this little vertical post with some dots next to it. If you hover over the field that value is in and drag left and right, it will always increase and decrease the number. So you'll notice if I go down to size here and drag my size down, drag my size back up again, it's a really, really handy way to position things. So for example, he was about to show you a change in azimuth, and you can drag left and right to have that azimuth change happen. So if I put it kind of back to the middle. So just for the sake of argument here, I'm going to start about here. And you'll notice sometimes if you want to get the number really precise, sometimes it helps to just take it out of live, type in the number, hit execute. Okay. And so I'll set this one down to like 12. Okay. And so we're going to reproduce his rocket thing with that weird bluish, greenish disc thing. I think he had it fade in over about 3 seconds or so. So our first cue was slide fade in over a few seconds. And I think where Brad might have been going with the rocket was we were going to raise the rocket. So in order to get the rocket to change and do something, we needed to add another cue. And if I go back to slide, I keep losing where slide is. There it is. Remember that he said all the values will be minimized except for the ones you want to change. So let's change the position of it. I think he had it, well, say over 8 seconds. If I go to live now, I can choose that up point like that over say 8 seconds. And if I hit OK, then what'll happen is, let's pretend we're doing this with the rocket. Once it hits that Q, our rocket kind of flies up over 8 seconds. But what I would also do with the rocket, as we see rockets get higher and higher and higher in the sky, do they appear to be the same size as they get higher and higher? I think if a rocket went to high elevation at the zenith of our dome, it would seem to get smaller, right? So what I could do with the rocket, if I had a rocket, is also open my size. And while it's flying higher, it could also be getting smaller. So let's have it go higher and get smaller over 8 seconds. And you'll have to pretend that this is the rocket. It's a spaceship instead. So basically the rule here is a bunch of things could be changing at the same time as long as you put them all in one queue. So while that was changing, it could also be rolling, for example. We could do a roll, and if I put it in live, hopefully you can see what I mean here. A roll would twist it around. What if we wanted it to roll all the way around, like 360 as it flies up? If I just told it to roll to 360, I'm actually going to type in 359. It's just going to go around by 1 degree. But there's a really nice trick you can do where you say roll the long way. So rather than going the shortest distance, 1 degree to 359, it'll roll all the way around the long way to 359. And let's do that over 8 seconds. So long way is just rather than taking the shortest distance to a roll position, it's taking the longest position, longest route to it. You'll see what I mean in a second. So it's only going to roll 1 degree from 0 to 359, but I think I checked the roll long way box, so it does a complete 360-degree rotation. Okay. So now let's say, for the sake of argument, after I've done that, in this second step, I've put 3 different commands. I've changed its position, I've changed its size, and I've added a roll to it while it does that. What if at this point, all I wanted to do is just fade down to transparent? In order to get it to fade, what would I do now? Anybody know? At this point in my show, I want it to begin to fade out. How do I initiate the fade? I'm going to add another cue. I'm going to select slide. And the only value I'm going to change is its brightness and opacity, or color and opacity. Okay. So if I tell it I want to go back down to 0, and the great thing is with color and opacity, I can just click a box to get it to go from 100 to 0, or its opacity to go from 100 down to 0. So I'm going to tell it to go down to 0 over, let's say, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. And again, what I did was I just changed opacity from 100 down to 0. And just to be safe, I take the colors from 100 down to 0 as well, just to make sure everything goes down to 0. And then if I hit OK, and we run our script, what we should see is the slide appears. And right here, it just takes a few seconds to fade out. Got it? Any questions on that basic process? The general rule of all this is typically, often, not typically, but often you'll use 1 cue to bring the slide onto the dome. It's your load slide that fades it on. Then if you're going to edit that slide, you create a new cue and you do all the steps that involve its movement or changing its brightness or changing its appearance in some way. And then oftentimes when you want it to go away, you can use another cue to fade it down. There's one other cue that I want to describe that can be a bit of a time saver. It can be a little bit of a trick to create a new cue and set those things. So we also created a thing called a slide kill. It's a way to just easily make a slide go away. So let's say I want to fade that slide out. Another way to do it is to say slide kill. And sometimes you're dealing with a lot of slides. You've put 8 slides up at a time. You could tell this slide kill queue to kill all of them at once. Just all slides go out at the same time. And this is why this is useful. Imagine I had 8 slides going on my dome. I could tell all the slides to all fade out together over 6 seconds or so. I don't really need to because I only have 1 slide here, but I'm going to put a slide kill in that's just going to fade it out over 5 seconds. Okay. And out it goes. There's one other function that we use slide kills for. If you put a bunch of slides up at once, you guys may remember yesterday when Dave Bradstreet was demonstrating like the Hubble tuning fork example. Those were videos rather than slides, but they follow the same principle. Basically what Starry Night does is move all of the data, all the memory for all those slides onto the graphics card. And graphics cards can handle a lot of information, but eventually the more stuff you put on your graphics card, the more sort of full it gets, if that's the right word. And your system can slow down if you've got like 20, 30, 40, 50 slides in texture memory on the graphics card, just waiting to get used again. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll just do a slide kill instantly, just a 0 duration slide kill for all the slides. And what that does is not only will it make them go away, it'll completely wipe them out of the texture memory of the graphics card. So sometimes what you'll see is people will fade their slides out like I just did. And then a little bit down the line, just after all those slides fade out, you'll see a slide kill queue that will basically dump them out of texture memory, if that makes sense. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah. Back, Scott. So.
Okay, good. Why don't you take over if you would, please? I'm going to give you the screen back. I may not have followed the format you were going to follow. In my last queue, I went smaller in the last queue. I rotated the thing, faded it out, and then we covered slide kill.
Yeah, I've been following along for the past couple of minutes. You were.
Oh, gee, you should have taken over a lot earlier. You would have done a way better job than I did.
No, you were doing exactly the order I was going to do it.
Okay.
So, I just needed a short power nap. That's all. So.
I figured.
All right, let me get my screen back up here. All right, everything look good? All right. So yeah, so I basically have what Scott was doing there. So great. So we have a slide. Let's see what it looks like with a rocket. So the rocket shows up. It might be a little bit different than Scott's, but it should be pretty close. And then the rocket should fade away. Perfect. Okay, cool. It looks like he covered long way and all that stuff, so that's fantastic. So what we're going to look at doing next is having 2 images on the dome at the same time. All right. So it's not too difficult to do as long as you follow the rule that each image gets its own track in ATM-4. If you follow that rule, then you should be okay. If you try to put this more than one image and manipulate it on the same Starry Night track, what you'll find is, one, you will find it really hard because the slide, you have to hover over each cue to see, okay, what is it trying to control? But also, ATM-4 will get confused. It might work fine the first time you do it. The next time, there's no guarantee that that command might get rerouted to the wrong image. So there's just too much that can go wrong to try and manipulate multiple images at the same time using one track. So always, 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 if you have more than one image up at a time, have each image on its own track. And you can name the tracks. So you know exactly what's going on there, but just don't try to do more than one image on the same track. Now you should be able to, if you kill your images, you should be able to reuse that track later on in the show. That should dump the memory and it should be fine. I personally just find it easier to just keep it, the same rule going throughout, because then I have, one track and it just says the name of the image that that track controls. And then it's really easy to, oh yeah, what did I want to change? That one thing, that track, boom, scroll. Especially if you have a really long show, it can make it really it's a lot easier just to, stick with that rule through that whole show. I don't know, Dan, is that how you do it? Or do you reuse tracks or?
Reuse tracks if I reuse the same scene?
If you kill a slide off, do you ever use that track for another slide, or do you always just each image gets its own track?
I'll use the slide on same track only if it's the same slide. I'm completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Every slide gets its own line.
Yeah.
Way easier to organize it that way.
Yep. All right. So to do that, now on your side-home system, to add slides into ATM-4, it's actually a lot easier. This functionality doesn't work in Preview Suite, but I'll show you anyway. Well, kind of. Basically, you would, on your side-home system, that you'll have a shortcut on your desktop that says Slides 7. And opening that will take you to where all of the images live on your system. Yeah, Maggie, question?
Sorry, didn't want to interrupt.
Okay.
Before we move on, can you show us on your screen how you got your rocket to move like that? I got mine to turn, but I couldn't figure out how to get it to do that like continuous spinning motion.
It wasn't continuous.
Was it not? It looked like it was.
It did 359 degrees. I checked long way, so it's a computer program, so it's going to be lazy and try to do one.
Maybe that's what I did, and I just
So yeah, I tried doing long way, and it took so long and it was moving that it did kind of give the illusion that it just was, it kept spinning, but it really did do 359.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I was confused.
No, that's fine. So in Side-Home, on your Side-Home system, all you'd have to do is open the slides shortcut on your desktop, find the image that you want, and just drag that image, click and drag onto ATM-4, and ATM-4 will automatically give you a new Starry Night track, name that track, whatever the title of that image is, and place a Q file and open it up so that you can edit it. So it saves you a lot of steps if you already have your images on there, just dragging it into ATM-4. We're going to have to do it the long way with Preview Suite. For some reason, that's not working at the moment. So to do that, how do we add a track? Do people remember where that is? It's up to File and Add Track. Starry Night. And this one I'm going to call Satellite because I have a satellite image that I want to load in here. And I'm going to say, maybe sometime after the rocket is up, I'm going to add a satellite. So slide Q, slide, and then there's my satellite. So go ahead and pick, if you're following along, pick another image. And I'll go into live mode. I think Scott covered live mode, look like. And I'm just going to, roughly get it. I don't know, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Make it realistic here. And say, okay. So I'm going to rewind and let's see what this looks like. I haven't done anything with a satellite. It's just going to show up and appear. So rocket, satellite, and then the rocket does its crazy stuff. And so the slide kill here, I believe I set it to kill all slides. And I did, so they all fade off together. And so with the satellite, if I wanted it to move around or get bigger, or any of the stuff that we did with the rocket, you could with the satellite. You just do all those commands on the separate satellite track that I made there, or whatever image you happen to use. Make sense? So, question for people. Just going to move these down a little bit So there's one aspect here that I do want to make sure you understand. If you're ever using more than one image on the dome at one time, you notice, the rocket comes in, the satellite comes in, but the satellite is behind the rocket, right? Somehow the rocket is displaying on top of the satellite there. How might I switch what's on top? How could I maybe get the satellite on top of the rocket? What do you think would be the easiest way to do that?
Can you drag the satellite track over the Starry Night track? Move it up?
I can. So to move your tracks around, it's actually just right click and drag. So that's a good thing to try. Let's try that and see what that looks like. So there's the rocket. And the satellite is still behind it. So it was a good idea, but the order of your tracks makes no difference when it comes to Starry Night or any of the other devices. If you have multiple tracks for TLE, I don't know why you would do that, or audio files, anything like that. The track order here is just for yourself. That's the only thing that matters. So good thought, but no.
Try moving the time of the satellite cue in front of the time of the rocket.
Like this?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see what that does.
Bradley, anytime, can you slip me into a room with Rebecca?
And a rocket. Yeah, one.
I need to see her screen. I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
Yeah, one sec. Manually. Rebecca, you said?
Yes, sir.
There you go. Okay, so looks like the satellite is on top of the rocket. So success, right? What also is different though? I'll play that again. So apart from the satellite being on top of the rocket, what else is different than what we saw the first time? So there's that. And this. So apart from the satellite being in front of or behind the rocket, was there anything different in how we saw them or the order that we saw them? In this one, what do we see first? Rocket, then satellite, right? And in this one, what's the order? Satellite and then rocket. Now, this might not matter to you. You might not care which thing is you see first. But let's say you're doing a show and it's a historical show and one of the images you have is a map, and then you have smaller images where you're like circling specific things on the map. And you want those circles to display on top of the map, right? But you want the map up there first. So there has to be some way of setting the order of what's on top, right? There has to be some kind of way to order the layers here, okay? And we don't have a lot of more time here because of the technical stuff. So I'm gonna kind of lead us through this, okay? So, in this order here, you have the satellite on top and then the rocket. So let's say this is the order that I want. I want the satellite to be on top of in front of the rocket here, but I want to see the rocket first. All right, so instead of the satellite there and then the rocket, I want the rocket and then the satellite. I got to do this for you guys, I'm sorry. The webcam is the reverse. So I want to see the rocket and then the satellite comes on top of the rocket. So the trick here is I'm going to put the rocket first. Or sorry, the satellite first, because I want the satellite on top, right? But the key is to go in and, like Scott did before, let's make the satellite here completely invisible. So we've loaded it, but we don't see it. Nobody knows that we loaded it. So just kind of hovering there, completely invisible. And then when we're ready for it, a little bit later, we just go in and say, hey, let's make it visible. And we can make it look nice there. So we have satellite turns on, but is invisible. Rocket comes on, and then satellite becomes visible. Let's make sure we did this right. So satellite is on, nothing. Rocket fades in, and then satellite fades in on top of the rocket. All right, this is in the course notes. But if you ever want two images up at the same time and the order matters, like you need to see one of them first and then the other one second, then this is how you can kind of get around that. Whichever slide, whichever image you load first in your show is on top, the next one then is going to be behind that, and so on and so forth. And so this is one of the reasons why, if some of Dave Bradstreet's lessons that you've been seeing, he has a whole bunch of slide cues at the very beginning, kind of stepping up in a staircase fashion. One of the reasons he does that is that he loads them one after the other so that he can fade from one to the next and have make sure the right thing is on top. Because a lot of the images he used, they build on each other. And so that's the trick that he does there. The other reason that he and a lot of people kind of stack a bunch of these at the beginning is, even with really powerful computers nowadays, it still takes a little bit of memory to load an image. And if you have Starry Night running time, you might see just a little bit of a hiccup if time is flowing and you try to load a few images. So what a lot of people will do is, either at the beginning of their show, or if it's a long show, maybe partway through where it's kind of a quiet spot, is they'll load a whole bunch of new images so that they're there ready to go, and you just have to make them visible. Because making them visible is a lot less intense on your resources than loading them in the first place. Does that make sense? So that's why you'll see a lot of shows where the images will kind of stair step, and they're all loaded invisibly, so you don't see anything. And then all you have to do in your show to see them is just make them visible. All right, so questions on that? There's one last thing I want to cover here. Okay, I am going to add a new track. And we're going to now take a look at adding little movie clips into Starry Night. So I'm going to just move all these down a ways. So to add a little movie clip, now this is not a full dome video. If you want to add one of the, the full dome videos that you've purchased, that's something different. That's actually the video track up here, which behaves very much like the soundtrack. You load the video and you play it. But for like a little video clip that you want, maybe it's an asteroid collision, or you have a clip of someone talking, you just want to put a little video clip somewhere on the dome. That's done through Starry Night. And you use the same cue, you use the slide cue. And the difference here is right up here where it says slide, you say movie. And then you click on movie. And I'll just find one of Dave Bradstreet's movies in here. There we go, Halley Nucleus. And I'll go ahead and go into live mode here. And note that the Halley's Comet is down there. Now, every single control that we had over the slides, the static images, we have over the movie clip. I can make it bigger, I can rotate it, we can fade it in, we can fade it out, we can layer them. Everything's exactly the same. The one difference is that movies come up in what we call transparent mode, because it's really hard, if not impossible, for movies to be on a transparent background. So what transparent mode does here is the black that's in the background of this movie, because it's technically a rectangular movie, it just makes that transparent, which makes the movie itself kind of transparent. So typically what you'll do, if you have movie clips playing, is at the very beginning here, I'll have a nighttime scene or something that's kind of dark so that it's easier to see this rocket. So if I put in like a black favorite would work, suddenly it's a lot easier to see that. And with Halley's Comet, this is going to be out in space, right? So if you haven't seen that mini lesson, it's a nice little mini lesson. But the one additional control you have over movie clips like this is once I have it loaded, there's a cue called the play cue right here, play. And this lets me pause the movie, start it up again, or if I want to, I can just kill the movie, stop the movie. So what a lot of people will do, if they want to load a movie clip and play it later, is you can go in here, do the same trick, load it invisibly, and then put a pause, a play cue in that's pausing the video, and have that right up against the video, the movie load. And then somewhere along the lines here, you will say, bring the video back up. And start playing it again. So we should see nothing until this comes up and it starts playing. So that's a little trick there. Because the same thing, possibly even worse than slides, is trying to load a movie clip while Starry Night is running time. You can, if you want to avoid any little glitches like that, that's the trick. So that's a very brief overview of putting images and movie clips onto your dome. Yeah, questions, Nate?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that I find some little clip online and it has sound. How does that affect things? Is it automatically off? Can I turn it on? Can I turn it off? I didn't see controls for that.
There are not controls for sound in this. So if there is sound, it will play. If there isn't sound, then it won't play, obviously. But yeah, there's not individual control for the movie clips here.
So how would I turn the sound off if I wanted to?
So for that, you could just turn the pre-flight volume off. So I don't have this in here. You might have it. There's a volume track that can just take your actual system volume. Like on pre-flight, there should be one for pre-flight and one for render box. And that will actually go and take your Windows volume and change it to whatever you want it to be. You just want to make sure if you do that, that you change it later. And that's going to affect all audio from your pre-flight.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. So there are some other things that you can do with images that we just didn't have time for. You can have full dome images. So, if I go back into the slide queue, at the top here where it says Keystone, there's an option for full screen. So if you have images that are designed to fill up the whole dome, you can display them that way. For Preview Suite, you might find if you're designing shows specifically for streaming and for people to view at home, then you might find going to flat mode for your images looks a little bit nicer, because with Keystone, it's warping the image so it looks good on the dome. And so what you'll tend to find is that rocket looked like it kind of had a bulge in the middle the higher it got up on the dome, because it was doing a fisheye correction. Flat will get rid of that. And so you can, a lot of times, if I just want to use this and have images go up on the dome, like Dave Bradstreet did, where he put the Hubble Deep Field up there instead of zooming in, you can just make it flat mode, put it all the way at the center, and just make it big, and it'll look like a good image. But again, that's only for Preview Suite. That's not applying for Sitem. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
When when you put up on the Starry Night track and you put the slide kill, that actually took care of the 2 images, the 2 slides that you'd put in,
Yes.
but it doesn't take out the movie?
Let me share that again. It didn't take out the movie because the movie didn't exist yet.
Oh,
But if I bring this all kind of here and get all crazy. Let's see what this looks like. Rocket, satellite. Halley's Comet. So it will. So I have this, as long as you have it set to kill all slides, the movie clip is still considered a slide, right? Because we use the slide queue.
all right.
Yeah, I just didn't run it the first time.
So will the slide kill function only do what's before that
Correct.
spot?
Yep. Yeah, only the slides that you've loaded, images or movie clips up to that point will it clear out. Even if you haven't seen them on the dome, if you haven't used them yet, if you have a kill all slides, it will get rid of them. And if you want to use them later, you'll have to reload them. Okay.